This is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line on 938 Live.
Now, two major British banks, RBS and Lloyds, have said that they would relocate to London if Scotland votes for independence. Lloyds has plans to set up legal entities in England, while RBS said it would be necessary to re-domicile the bank's holding company. Now, the announcements come after a poll showed a slender lead to those who want to keep the union with England. The Scots still have about a week to decide, as the vote for independence will only take place next Thursday. For more on this, we have on the line with us David Kuo. He's the chief executive for the Motley Fool Singapore. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Bharati.
Now, David, why would RBS and Lloyds decide to move in the event that the Scots vote yes to independence?
Okay, well, there's a few reasons. I mean, the major one is that most of their business is done in the England part of the United Kingdom anyway. So therefore, I mean, it makes sense to actually have their headquarters in England rather than in Scotland. And I suppose the other question is, well, the other issue is these two banks are owned by the UK taxpayers through the UK government. In the case of RBS, the UK taxpayers own about 85% of, well, the English taxpayers own about 85% of RBS. So therefore, I guess there could be some political pressures on these two banks to relocate back to the UK. And there's also a third issue, and that is what we call the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. This is what would happen if a bank were to go bust. The government would be responsible for compensating the depositors. And it would only work if these two banks were registered in England rather than in Scotland.
Right. What do you think the other financial firms will do? There's, of course, Aberdeen Asset Management, to a lesser extent, Barclays and HSBC.
This is the big issue. I mean, each one of these banks, each one of these financial institutions will have to decide for themselves whether they want to be located in Scotland or in England. And I think, you know, the main issue is, do they do most of their business in Scotland or do they do most of their business in England? If it's in Scotland, then it would make sense for them to be domiciled and headquartered in Scotland. If it's in England, then it would make sense for them to shift their operations to the England part. But I guess the main thing really is, if Scotland were to actually sort of leave the UK, would it be a thriving economy? And I think the answer is it could very well be. And maybe some people are just getting a bit spooked at the moment.
So are you saying that their worries are unjustified, unfounded?
This is indeed very interesting, because if you have a look at Scotland, for instance, the size of its economy is about the same size as Singapore here. It has the same similar population. It's about 5 million people in Scotland. We have 5 million people here in Singapore. I don't think anybody would doubt that, you know, Singapore is a very thriving economy. It's independent. It doesn't depend on anyone. And, you know, in the case of Scotland, it could very well be the same situation. It could really sort of survive on its own.
Let's talk about the sterling pound for a moment. Scotland wants to keep it post-independence, but the Bank of England says no. How do you think the pound will perform, whatever the result?
This is, again, a very, very, very difficult issue. I mean, Scotland would like to have the pound. And in theory, I suppose it could. I mean, if you have a look at Hong Kong, I mean, it has the Hong Kong dollar. The Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar. So everybody knows that if you have 7.78 Hong Kong dollars, you can swap that for $1 US. So Scotland could do exactly the same. It could peg its Scottish pound against the pound sterling. But in order to do that, it would need to deposit, I think, roughly around £150 billion with what would become the Central Bank of Scotland. The issue is, does it have £150 billion to actually deposit with a central bank in order to peg its Scottish pound to the UK pound? The answer is probably no, so therefore it won't be able to do so. As far as the sterling is concerned, without Scotland, the UK would be a smaller entity, so therefore it is not surprising that sterling is falling as a result of that.
Thank you very much, David. David Kuo, Chief Executive for the Motley Fool Singapore. Thanks for joining us on The Bottom Line.